Okay, so in case you just got signed on, my name is Jesse, and I'm the guy who does the social media for seniors series for the Dallas Public Library. And in the past, we have done two of the more fun social media applications, or at least they're fun in my opinion, Instagram and Pinterest. And if you're interested in seeing those previous ones that we've done, we have uploaded them to a playlist on the Dallas Public Library's YouTube page for your enjoyment and education in case you missed it the first few times. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about a social media platform that I particularly enjoy as a professional librarian, and it's called Goodreads. But of course, you already knew that for registering for this program. Now, the way this presentation is going to go about is there's going to be a short PowerPoint presentation where I'm going to explain the broad strokes of the application and how it goes. And then after that, there's going to be a brief question session where you can go ahead and have me clarify anything that I may not have explained very well, and I'll answer those questions. After that, we'll just go ahead and have a demonstration of what using Goodreads is actually like in real time with a demo account that I made for just this occasion. So with that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, switch over to the PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And at any time, you can go ahead and drop a question that you have in the chat function, which should be available at the bottom of your screen. And when it comes time for us to answer the questions in both Q&A sessions we will have, it'll be a-okay for us to go ahead and do. I'm going to be focused on the presentation first, and once we get to the Q&A time, that's when we're going to go ahead and answer any questions both in chat and asked over the microphone. So with that being the case, this is the social media for seniors presentation for Goodreads, and I like to begin these series by always hitting the same kinds of points about the internet in general and some best practices for existing on it. The very first thing that I always try to stress to anyone that I work with whenever it comes to internet, I should say websites on the internet, is avoid being too personal. You should never ever disclose any information that is close to you because it can be used against you. So this includes things that help identify you or your location. So things like your address, birth date, social security number, email, phone number, those should never ever be made public if you can help it. And thankfully, that's not going to be much of a concern here for Goodreads, but I always like to make sure that I hit these points because these are the first sets of rules for digital privacy. And with that being the case, they should never be far from your mind. Now, the next point is the internet is forever. So even if you delete something on a social media profile, whether it's a photo, a comment, or an account, you should go ahead and assume that there is going to be some sort of record of it somewhere, like someone making a screenshot of it. So what I would recommend is always, always be mindful of what you post and what you make public to other people. The next one is one that amuses me with the wording is the internet is dark and full of liars. In a lot of different websites, there's countless opportunities for scams, hoaxes, fake accounts, misinformation, disinformation, as well as other threats to you and your online security. That said, if you know what to look for, you can spot them and avoid them, and in the process, avoid the worst connotations of those options. And another thing that this one is more pertinent to Goodreads than the preceding three rules. You can't control what other people post because when it comes to the internet, the only things you can really control about it are what you bring to it, who sees your content, what you choose to consume, and where you choose to go. And the final point is there is a price. Most social media platforms like Goodreads or Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, whichever one, they might not be charging you up front, but there is a cost because what they can do is track your activity in order to show you ads and products that may appeal to you better than other people. Now, with all of those particular rules out of the way, we're going to go ahead and start learning about Goodreads proper. So what exactly is it? It's a website and social media platform that revolves around books. And accordingly, you can manage various reading lists. You can write reviews for books that you've read and recommend books to the friends that you have on your account. Goodreads has been around for over a decade now, but it was purchased, I should say, by Amazon in 2013. And ever since they acquired it, they've done their best to help have it conform to the products they already had, like the Amazon store and the Kindle e-readers. So if you are a big Amazon and Kindle person, Goodreads is definitely going to be something that's going to work better for you. But even if you don't want to combine all three of those particular accounts together, Goodreads still has a lot of good that it can do you. And we'll be showing more of that in the demonstration here in just a second. If you're interested in signing up for a Goodreads account, you just need one of the following three things, I should say: a working email address, a Facebook account, or an Amazon account. And once you actually have that verified with the interface of Goodreads, the first thing that they're going to have you do is give you a wide selection of books and genres of books. So you get to look at various titles that you can tell Goodreads, I have read this, or I want to read this in the future. In addition to that, it also asks you to rate the books so that the algorithms that they use to help recommend new material for you can get a better feel for your tastes and what you prefer when it comes to the things that you read. And it does very much help with the recommendations. And as I previously mentioned, this could work even better for you if you're an Amazon shopper. However, that means you also give Amazon more information about you, and that's something that some people don't want to do, and that's entirely valid. So I have a quick little demonstration here of what it's going to look like when it comes to that first screening that you do after you're signing up for an account. All of these particular books displayed on screen are nonfiction ones, but of course they're all across the board when it comes to content. Omnivore's Dilemma is about food. Oliver Sacks was a neuroscientist. Factfulness is about data literacy, and there's of course Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson's astrophysics books. And as you can see on screen, it is encouraging you to rate the books that you have read, or at least say that you want to read it. In some cases, there's also an option to say, like, I'm not interested, so you can avoid things like that. But with this particular case, when I was just entering it, I just was trying to find the ones that I genuinely had read, because one of my own personal rules as a librarian and as a consumer is I'm not going to knock it if I haven't consumed it myself. Now, this next screen is part of the same process of Goodreads getting to understand what my personal preferences were like when I was making this new account. And as you can see right here on screen, there's several different science fiction books on the top level. But of those 5 that they offered me, I had only read Kurt Vonnegut's anti-war novel, Slaughterhouse-Five, which I rate at the highest rating of 5 stars because I genuinely love that book. And accordingly, Goodreads also says, well, if you liked Slaughterhouse-Five, there's these 5 other books that you might be interested in. And they may not necessarily be books that you expect to see there, because Animal Farm is a fable. Catcher in the Rye is a novel about a kid in, I believe it's New York, now that I'm thinking about it. It's been a long time. Of course, there's Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, Albert Camus' The Stranger, and Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. Not all of those are about the content that are in Slaughterhouse-Five or anywhere close to it. But there is a common theme, because not only is Slaughterhouse-Five and all of these books are taught in public schools, in high schools, usually around the same age range, like later high school years. So that is why they had said, well, what are your thoughts on these particular books? Now, once you've actually done the overall screening process and have given Goodreads a taste of what you particularly enjoy, then the lion's share of what you're going to be working with Goodreads is about the shelves. And a shelf is essentially a group of books that a user can organize under different kinds of headings. And once you actually complete that screening that they have you do to find out the things that you enjoy, you get 4 to start off with. There's I have read this book, or just read for short, currently reading, want to read, and all, which is just the preceding 3 categories just all together. And like I mentioned, you can make and organize your own shelves and name them whatever you please. And books can be listed on more than one shelf at a time. So as an example of some of the self-created shelves would be, I didn't finish this book, but I would like to. So I named that one To Finish, or these are some comic books that I think are absolutely the best, and I named that shelf Top Shelf Comics. And then the other two would be, this is a book so good I should read it every year, or the opposite, I hated this book and I never want to read it again. One thing I do feel the need to mention though, there is not an option to make a shelf private. So if you have friends on Goodreads, they can see the books that you've liked, the reviews that you've written, and the shelves you've organized. And after the shelves, the next major portion of the application revolves around rating and reviewing books. And of course, rating refers to giving the book a grade from 1 to 5 stars. 1 meaning I didn't like it, and 5 being it was amazing. And reviewing is, of course, where you write out a summary of your thoughts and overall impression of the book in a text box for people to read alongside your rating. And it is plain text, but you can edit it with HTML formatting commands. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, I will explain it here in a few minutes. And these reviews are extremely useful because they help consumers know whether a book is going to be something that they're going to like or not. And in addition to that, it can also help a lot of independent authors reach a higher profile through word of mouth. So some authors, like say James Patterson and Stephen King, they've been in publishing for a long time. They don't need any help. But with independent publishers, if someone has a really well-written review and makes the book that they've written sound very compelling for other readers, that helps them out a great deal. But of course, not all reviews are equally useful or insightful. And there's plenty of different examples of people who've given ratings to books without an explanation, because coming up with a good book review, it takes more time and effort than some people are willing to put into it. And that's entirely valid. And another aspect that Goodreads is excellent with is helping you with reading goals, because there are parts of the website that help you track your progress as you continue the books that you're reading. So when I made my little demo account here, I made it in September. And at that point, I had 3 months and change left in the year. So I just said, I want to try to read 6 books in 2021. And as I complete more books throughout the rest of this year, it's going to go towards that particular little challenge. And that can be great. Now, there are some things that I should mention about Goodreads, because there are some advantages and disadvantages to that, but in addition to some things that aren't readily apparent. Now, the first thing that I would recommend as a best practice for Goodreads is you may want to exercise a little bit of discretion, because not every book that you read really needs to be listed on your Goodreads account. There aren't any options for making private lists, so it might be better to let some books go uncatalogued, and some self-censorship can be helpful. As an example, there are some types of books that we don't necessarily want other people to know that we're reading, and if we did have that secret get out, that could get pretty uncomfortable. And of course, as a librarian, I am under the professional ethic that I am not supposed to reveal anything that a patron or a customer asks me to help them find. So that's one thing where you have the benefit of my silence. I cannot and will not be ever sharing what I know someone to be reading, unless it's for very good reason, like a Patriot Act request. That's the sole exception. But if you're self-reporting the things that you're reading to something like Goodreads, that can give more information for people than they may be wanting to know. Now, after that first one, you may want to be just a little bit skeptical with the things that you can find on Goodreads, or just the internet in general, because as I mentioned earlier, the internet is dark and full of liars. And specifically with Goodreads, every so often you can find a little cataloging error or something questionable. And some quotes that they have, because there is an entire section of quotes on Goodreads, they often don't have a citation there, like it was on this page number in this printing of the book, or something like that. And of course, your browsing is going to determine the ads that shows up. So much like any other website, the activity that you engage with is going to better inform the algorithms for Goodreads, the things that you might be interested in when it comes to products that those will determine the commercials you get to see while you're using Goodreads. And in my time using it in both a professional and a personal capacity, there's definitely some goods and bads to it. On the positive side, it's very useful for finding new different books and helping track your progress reading them. And the recommendation tools and organizing them into different lists has a very nice benefit as well. And it's also cool, well, shame on me for misspelling encouragement right there. It's missing the E, hate typos, must fix. It's great to have encouragement where you can see the activity of someone picking up a certain book that you might love and say, oh, I loved this one, and you have the ability to make comments on it. So that's a nice way to have the in-person book conversations, but you're just having them online. Now, as far as the cons go, when it comes to the website for Goodreads, the interface is a bit clunky and the design isn't particularly easy on the eyes. Not to mention, beyond the basics, there's a bit of a steeper curve for learning some of the more advanced features. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, some entries for books and authors could use some better curation and authority control. But that's me as a librarian giving them a particular critique that's pertinent to me. And I'll give you a great example for that. So in preparing my little demonstration account, I was browsing the bibliography of someone whose work I rather admire. You can see his little author profile down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. His name is David Simon. He's a journalist and a writer, and he had been a reporter in Baltimore covering the crime beat for the Baltimore Sun for a good long time until he eventually broke out into television and ended up producing a similar material. He's the gentleman behind a TV show that HBO produced called The Wire, which some people, including me, believe to be one of the finest programs that America has ever made. So with a resume like that, when I found this book called Bad Golf listed in his bibliography, I was very skeptical, and I went so far as to double check by looking up his particular website, and what do you know, I did not see a book referencing golf. That just didn't seem like him to me. And that's and this is a great example of Occam's razor, where the simplest solution is probably the most likely one. It's probably a different man that just happens to be named David Simon, and it just got lumped in under the wrong author profile, which is a shame. And unfortunately, it's not the only time I've seen that happen on the website. I found one with Joe Hill, who's a horror writer, that was essentially a marriage for a manual on marriage for married men. My apologies there. A bit of a tongue twister with too many M's there. So that's one of the cons that annoys me as a professional librarian, because I would like to see a little bit better organization, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So that's a quibble, but it's a quibble that just annoys me on a professional level. So with that being the case, we're going to go ahead and pause on the presentation for a second. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and we're going to have some question time. I'll give about 5 minutes worth of time for anyone who has any questions for the things that I have covered already. And maybe I went over the material a little bit too quickly. And if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer that. And you can do so either by unmuting yourself here on Zoom, or if you want to just list it in the chat, and that will be perfectly fine. So I'm going to open up the chat window, and I'm going to keep my eyes on that. But if you would rather voice your question aloud, you can absolutely do so. Okay, I see our first question popping up right here. It's from Shivran. I apologize if I mispronounced that, by the way. And he says, please tell me, why would we use the Goodreads? Well, Shivran, what you can use Goodreads for is keeping track of your own personal reading history and finding new material that you might enjoy reading more of in the process. All right, what is the difference between Kindle and Goodreads? Kindle is Amazon's e-reader service. So that's the device that they actually use. And Goodreads is an entirely separate website, but that is still under the Amazon umbrella. That's very different. Karen, what is the Friends Circle? You can actually make friends and incorporate them from Facebook, because a lot of people use both Facebook and Goodreads. So you can find people that use both, and you can hopefully bond over similar reading material. Okay, Billy asks, would the books be available from the library or are they for sale through Amazon? A good portion of these books that you can see on Goodreads are indeed available at the Dallas Public Library because we do have a very large collection in here that we are quite proud of. And in addition to that, on some particular entries on a book, which I will be showing you here in the demonstration, they'll actually have links for Kindle as well as bookstores and an Amazon link where you can just go straight to that particular website and buy it. Like I said, Amazon owns the thing, so of course they're going to make sure that they put their two services at the disposal for the discerning consumer. Are the books free on Goodreads? All right, now that's one thing I do want to clarify. Like Goodreads itself doesn't give you the ability to read the books. It's just helping you discover more material. And it's more about you get to read reviews of books as well as other like author profiles and things like that. So it's closer to being the library catalog, but it's very different from an e-reader or like say Kindle or Apple Books or Google Books or anything like that. So it won't give you the ability to read the actual content of a book in question. That's a very good distinction, and I'm glad someone brought it up. Oh, and don't worry about the typo, Billy. I didn't even see it for first pass. I just wanted to make sure I answered the question. Okay, so I've got about 2 more minutes right here in the designated first Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions that I'd be happy to clarify, now's the time before I start sharing my screen again, this time with actually using Goodreads in process. And that's going to take up the lion's share of this particular event because, okay, I do see one. Do book clubs use this? I can see a lot of uses for book clubs doing that because in addition to actually tracking progress on books and recommending them to other people with the social network part of it, there are actually group discussions right there. And with that being the case, you can even take some of the questions from those discussions and bring them to your own personal book groups, whether they're sponsored here at the Dallas Public Library or if it's one that you attend in your own private life. Okay, Shivran asks, can you tell us how to borrow the books from the library? Okay, so Shivran, with that being the case, what you first and foremost need is a library card here in Dallas. And once you actually have that, you will, and you go through the necessary steps of like verifying address and all of the other little qualifications that we have, then you would actually have the ability to use e-content with say Hoopla, Libby, or what's the other one? I can't think, I'm on the spot. I can't think of it right now. Overdrive, that's it. I just couldn't think of it right away. So that's what you would want to use for the e-material with the Dallas Public Library account. Goodreads doesn't allow you the opportunity to actually read the stories that you can be finding about here. It's more about discovering and browsing for material than it is actually reading them. And of course, you can apply for a Dallas Public Library account online. When the course of the pandemic, we did have a digital sign up being an option. But of course, we are open for business now. A lot of people don't actually know that our doors are open. So you're welcome to visit your nearest Dallas Public Library neighborhood branch, bring a valid form of ID and proof of residence. And we'll see about getting you a library card and helping you get the material you're interested in. Excuse me, I needed a little bit of water there. Oh, glad to hear that. Billy says that she loves her library, or our library. My mistake. I happen to be broadcasting from the Bachman Lake Library today. Okay, so I think that's the allotted time we have for the first Q&A session. I don't see any new questions that need answering at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and resume sharing my screen. And this time we're going to go head over to Goodreads. And one thing I'm happy about is I think my cursor will actually be on screen this time. That was a difference with our other programs regarding Instagram and Pinterest, where I was reduced to using my iPad, which did not have a cursor. Okay, so with that being the case, I just wanted to verify that everyone can see the Goodreads screen right here. A moment ago, I just went back over to the Zoom tab, which is available at the top of my screen. All right, so I just would like to Matthew, can you sound off and verify that the Goodreads page is viewable?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, good to know. All right, so what we actually have right here is the entry screen for Goodreads. And there's a lot going on right here that I'm going to go ahead and try to cover pretty quickly, but a lot of it is pretty self-explanatory. This tan bar right up here is the task bar that's always going to be available to you as you browse throughout the site. And accordingly, there's several headings that can take you to various different parts of the website. So the home page is what we're on right now. And what we're seeing is the books that I'm currently reading over here to the left. In the center, they have banners and advertisements. So Amazon is particularly interested in offering this one particular book, but I'm not going to click on it because I don't want to navigate away from Goodreads for the presentation. We also have a banner here because, of course, it's October, and that means Halloween's coming up. So a lot of people want to be reading horror books coming up soon. So that is actually some curated lists from the staff of Goodreads recommending some other new ones. So even if that's not necessarily something that you're normally interested in, they make that available. It's kind of like an article in a magazine where they just say, here's some things you may not know about. And beneath the banner, we actually have the feed, which is a bunch of activity that is most recent, a recent activity going on from the Friends and Goodreads community you currently have access to. And you can customize what your feed is going to be like with this little gear button right here. At the moment, I had actually made the choice to show Goodreads activities. So not every single person here in the list is a friend of mine in real life. It's just showing what all is going on because I thought that would actually be a good way to show an active feed because this is a demonstration account more than anything else. Now, that being the case, over here in the left-hand side, we can see the 3 items that I currently have listed in my currently reading shelf, the one that I had mentioned earlier. So the 3 books I currently am making progress on are The Tao of Seneca, which is writings of a Stoic philosopher that's compiled by Timothy Ferris, The Fault in Our Stars, which is a novel written by John Green, and then also Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel Prize winning psychologist in behavioral economics gentleman. And if I am correct, I think Thinking Fast and Slow also won the Pulitzer Prize. And I've only read 1 chapter of it, but it's already one of my favorite books that I've ever had. It's really good. I can't wait to make more progress. And some members of our class today probably have heard me talk about this a lot in the Senior Coffee Club, which is another event that I run for the Dallas Public Library. And I may talk about that here in a few minutes or so. Now, you can also see there's these buttons right here for updating the progress. So I did make some progress earlier. So I made it to page 33 on that particular ebook, and I've just updated the progress accordingly, and I just enter here. In some particular iterations, it'll actually tell you how much you've made in an overall percentage of the book. So for The Fault in Our Stars, I'm 11% done, so that just means I have another 89% to finish. Now down here, it also has the collection of things that I want to read. So I'm interested I don't have any grounding in the Russian literature novels. So of course I was looking at the works of Count Tolstoy as well as Dostoevsky. Eventually I'll want to get around to them. And of course, this is not the entirety of my own reading history, but I think I did a decent job at showing a decent amount of my taste so that you can actually see how this works. Now, before we navigate into the actual shelves, I'll do a brief little description of what each of these little things on the taskbar are. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. All right, so there, of course, is the home button, which redirects us exactly where we are. My Books is going to show all of the items that are available in the shelves that I have interacted with on Goodreads directly. Browsing, as you can see, there's a drop-down menu. So it'll allow you to look at recommendations based on your tastes, choice awards, and these are things that are chosen by the community, as well as giveaways, things that are about to be released, new lists that other people have put together. as well as exploring news and interviews. Meanwhile, if you wanted to actually be browsing your own material, there's the favorite genres that I have already chosen. So I've enjoyed reading biographies, classics, comic books, fantasy, and everything else that's listed on screen, as well as the option to go to all the genres in case I feel the appetite for something different. The community tab actually has a lot of the extra features that we won't be getting into too deeply here, but I had mentioned previously that there's a quotes feature right here. So you can actually find quotes from books and from various authors. But like I'd mentioned, I just wish there had been a little bit better citations so that you knew for sure where this quote was made at what time. And that way they're more trustworthy that way. And you can join various groups, have discussions on materials, and there's even some trivia and quizzes that are user generated, and they're a lot of fun. Now, these ones over here in the corner are similar to the sorts of buttons that you'll find on other social medias. This is for notifications. This one is for group discussions. This one is for messages. So I did make a new friend here just based on my activity. So there is a message waiting for me in that particular button, but I haven't gotten that person's permission as to if they would want to be in this presentation. So I'm not going to click on it right here. And that's a list of my friends that I have made already. And this is my particular profile button. So I'm going to try to hit as many of these as I can, but first and foremost, with the hour that we have, I'm going to devote most of my attention towards the My Books option. Whoops, that is, okay. I didn't want the horror week. Here we go. There we go. My Books. So as I mentioned, you get 4 different bookshelves but for getting a Goodreads account, and they are the ones that you have, are, or want to read. So anything that you interact with on Goodreads right here. So for instance, there's this historical book, Team of Rivals, written by Doris Kearns Goodwin. I do believe that one had written the Pulitzer Prize. I've already classified this one as to read. Now, earlier I had made the critique that Goodreads design is a little bit clunky at times, and this is a great example for it, because on the one hand, you do have the title right here, but you have each of these particular little columns right here that gives you more data about the book itself. And it's okay if you're a guy like me who enjoys looking at spreadsheets and seeing these particular bits of data. But if you would prefer it to be a little bit easier on the eyes, you have another option over here for the cover view. So that way you can actually see what these books actually look like and see what you have here. So that's a thing that may increase your own enjoyment of using Goodreads. So I thought it was worth mentioning. Now we're going to go back to table view right here because you're going to be able to see a little bit more right here. As you notice, each one of these individual books comes with its own average rating score. So the higher the grade, that means the more people think that it's a particularly good book. So Elie Wiesel's book Night is no surprise that it has an average rating of at least 4.34 stars. And I particularly rate The Great Gatsby highly, but it seems like a lot of other people don't agree with me. So it's a lower rating than, say, To Kill a Mockingbird right here. And as you may notice, I've got in the column right over here on the shelf that I'm using for them, I have them in the shelf books that I have read, as well as all-time faves, because I legitimately love both of those 2 books. I was that nerd in school that genuinely loved most of the books that they had us read in school. That can't be said for Twilight, though. If you enjoy that, that's perfectly fine. No judgment. But it's just not my particular taste. And same for Lord of the Flies. But you can also, as I mentioned, you can have books on more than one shelf. And I just showed you that with the ones that are on my red shelf, as well as the all-time favorites. But what I'd like to do is show you how to make a new entry onto one of those shelves. So with that being the case, we're going to choose this particular shelf I've made here called Stoicism. And if you're not familiar with that, it's a school of thought and philosophy that dates back to the Romans, and it's a very nutritious philosophy that I have found to serve me well, especially over the past few years. So these are books that are commonly found from the Stoic philosophers. So there's the one I mentioned earlier, the Tao of Seneca that I'm currently reading. I haven't given it a star rating yet because I haven't finished it, but there is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. That's another book I highly recommend. But right now, what I want to do is add some more books to this list because this is also a collection of things that I'm interested in, but I'm wanting to keep them all under one subject heading. So I'm going to choose Ryan Holiday right here because he's an author who has rebranded himself lately as one of the people who writes deeply about Stoicism. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a few of his books here. The Daily Stoic is already on my Stoicism shelf, but I'm going to choose The Obstacle is the Way, click Edit right here with my shelves, click the box for Stoicism, and it is now on that particular shelf. Although the number over here on the side does not yet reflect that. So I click that, and both of these two books of his are now on my Stoicism shelf. And if I click, the website is going to refresh. And where there had been 4 books on that shelf, now there are 6. So and I mentioned that Goodreads has all different types of materials. So we want to be inclusive. So these are a list of some of my particular favorite comic books that I have listed here. So I can add them in addition. So like there's the ones that are famously written by Alan Moore and Grant Morrison. And you can find different reading material here. So this way you can actually make a case that Goodreads is good for people of literally all different reading abilities and reading tastes. Okay, so with that being the case, we're going to go ahead and switch gears a little bit here and go to learn on what a book entry looks like. And I have one particular title in mind here. This book is called Becoming Superman. It's a memoir by one of the great writers of our time, in my humble opinion, by the name of J. Michael Straczynski. And he has written a little bit of everything. He created this science fiction program called Babylon 5, another one called Sense8. He's written a lot of comic books, as well as the Clint Eastwood movie Changeling. If you have not seen that, that's a very difficult movie. It's one of the few times Hollywood has actually made a movie that they didn't say is based on a true story. No, Joe was so diligent in reporting on the detail of that particular movie that they actually said, this is a true story. He's did just that good on it. So as I mentioned, like the entry here for the actual book has a lot going on for it. Like it shows you who wrote it, the average rating, which at 4.63, this is a pretty well-regarded book, but it could use some more ratings because it's been rated about 1,500 times and only has about 363 reviews. Because like we mentioned, reviews take more time and effort to do than just giving it a star rating. And in addition to that, there's the links for where you can actually get the book on Kindle, Amazon, or other stores like these, as well as libraries. So there is a link right there that can serve you well to see if there's copies of a book in a library as well. And it'll also tell you how many pages it is, and there's more details available there. But immediately beneath that header, it shows you this little heading for my particular activity. So I have given it 5 stars, and I put it on 2 different shelves. And I recorded that I had read this in some time ago, and I've also written a review for it. And I felt the need to highlight this particular one because I mentioned earlier that when you're writing a review for a book, you have to use this thing called hypertext markup language. And I know that sounded like a mouthful because it was, but that refers to how you can add hypertext markup language is one of the forms of coding that creates the internet in general. And it's a basic one. And that's how I needed to be able to do that in order to bold things like the things that I think a reader should know about with this particular book. So this particular one, Becoming Superman, there's a lot of child abuse at the very beginning because unfortunately Joe's father was the single worst I have ever read of with my own eyes. And I feel that anyone who would want to read this book should be aware of that in case they don't want to be upset or think of bad memories or anything like that. But I more or less concluded in this particular review that even though it can be challenging and have heavy emotions throughout it, it's a book that's worth reading because of the overall message that you can end up achieving your dreams even if you have a horrible childhood, and you can break the cycle of abuse, which I felt was something that was necessary. And that way I'm giving any other particular reader of that book the heads up that you might want to be a little careful with this one. And beneath my review, you can actually see other lists that this book appears in, like Writers' Lives or Poverty. And you can see more of the data about how people interact and feel about this book. So the ratings details here can be very illuminating. So of those nearly 1,500 reviews that have been written for Becoming Superman, over 1,000 of them, 70%, rated at 5 stars. So the people who read this book most often really, really love it. And there's only a paltry 4 one-star reviews, and I have looked at them. They don't even have a review. It's just a star rating. So that is plenty of information that will allow you, the consumer, to be able to find out whether or not this book is something that you may or may not enjoy. And in addition to that, this is the author profile for Mr. Straczynski that I had actually mentioned. And his is a little bit better kept than David Simon's, unfortunately. So this shows you how many followers his particular author profile has, as well as his bibliography. And of course, since he writes a lot of comic books, there's a lot of volume 1s and volume 2s, so they can be organized in series down here as well. Now, I'm also going to navigate away from this one right here because there are still some more things that I had wanted to show in the course of our presentation. So we're going to go ahead and look at some of the other particular, oops, I don't want those emails to be showing up right here. We're going to see some of the other particular profiles I follow right here. So we're going to go, I'm going to go ahead and open this up to the chat at the moment. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that I can take any requests. So someone in chat, go ahead and mention an author that you would like me to see about their Goodreads account. Because a lot of them do have the ability to control their own author profiles. Jonathan Mayberry? Okay, I'll take that one. Okay, just based on this little bit, it looks like he might be a horror writer. So when I search for Jonathan Mayberry, it looks like he's a Goodreads author. Now, what that means is it's essentially the equivalent of a verified profile, like say on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, where they have the blue check mark. But with Goodreads, they usually just have a black circle with the Goodreads logo, which is a lowercase g. So it redirected me to this particular item of Jonathan Mayberry's. And there's a lot of ratings for that particular one, 33,000. That's pretty significant. And this also can give you more information about the author in addition to the books that they actually create. So you can see here, it has his website, his social media, who he writes like, which the fact that he's inspired by Richard Matheson does not surprise me. That dude was fantastic. And he's been a member of Goodreads since 2007, and this is his URL here. So there's another example right here of all of these particular books that he's written, videos that he's got available, as well as his particular bookshelves. Now, one thing that should be mentioned is that when compared to, say, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Goodreads might be the biggest website when it comes to sharing books and books recommendations, but there's a wide gap between the users and the daily active users that are on Goodreads, and it's pretty significant. So I'm going to go ahead and also devote a little bit of time to checking around the communities. So I had mentioned that there are quotes that you can go through. So there's Oscar Wilde right here. There's the famous Marilyn Monroe quote. And as you can see, they are organized in tags over here. So there's some about God, some about truth, wisdom, poetry, death, knowledge, spirituality, success, and a lot of other different types of headings. I agree, Mr. Zappa. I will go ahead and like that one. what I'm going to go ahead and try to do here is look for my man, Mr. Mark Twain, because that gentleman was one of the wittiest men to have ever come out of our country, and I don't think that's a very controversial opinion. Like this one, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. I'll like that one. Good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. This is the ideal life. I don't know about a sleepy conscience, Mark, but to each their own. I do agree with this one. The man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read. Now, as I mentioned, this one has no source directly. So it may be something that Mark Twain had said, but it might not be.
Oh, they can't see your screen.
Oh, well, that's no good. Let's go ahead and try that again. Thank you for letting me know that, Matt. So we're going to switch that back over. So this is the screen that I had actually looked at for Mark Twain. Can you guys see it now? Oops, shouldn't navigate back.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so each one of these entries, okay, why is Jackson Browne showing up here? See, this is where we have one of those little bits of, oh, I see, that's why he came up as misattributed to Mark Twain. So we have some contrary information here. So this is a good example of why there could be some better ways to catalog the quotes and that are actually verified to have come from one source or another. But each of these particular quotes, now I do know that one, I'm pretty sure that particular quote did come from Mark Twain, but we're getting a little off the beaten path right here. So in addition to the quotes heading that can be found here, we're going to go ahead and show the recommendations. So this is based on the to read shelf that I have created for this particular one here. And this is another one based on the read and all-time favorites. So with this particular, we're going to go ahead and look at the all-time faves shelf right here. So that one has its own list. So, all right, so this is Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my to read shelf. I've never had the opportunity to read the help, but I'd be interested. Now, and if you wanted to just see a brief description of what these particular books are like, you can just hover your cursor over one of the pictures, and that way it'll give you a brief description, the author attribution, and in this case, it even says the number of the series it comes from, as well as its sequence in that series, which is very useful. Oh, I have already read The Giver, and I loved that one. All right, and as I mentioned, you can actually hit a not interested button if you don't particularly want to read this one. So, but I'm not seeing any here that I'm not interested in reading outright. But if I were, it would probably be Stephen King's It, because I don't particularly care for clowns. So no, thank you. But I'm not going to just hit that button there. I do want to read All the Pretty Horses someday. I don't particularly care about Wuthering Heights. So that one I could probably just go ahead and say is not interested. And that's how that goes about. So we have a bit of time left here at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and end the sharing of my screen and turn the opportunity back over to you guys so that we can have any answer any questions that may have come about just through the brief little demonstration I showed you with the website itself. Okay, looks like we've got Shivran back with another question. When you select a book, one of the options is to the library. If you click on the button library, does it know the link to the library you can borrow the books from? Well, I'm going to go ahead and just quickly check on that before I say one way or the other. So I'm going to navigate back to the book that I cited earlier, Becoming Superman, because I know for sure that our library does actually have a copy of that one. And I'll make sure that this actually works before I do anything else. I have a suspicion. Yep, that's what I thought. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and you guys actually are going to get a bonus resource in addition to Goodreads. So I'm going to share my screen, get it back here. Okay, so what it did right here is when I clicked on libraries, it actually took me to a different resource here called WorldCat. And this is short for World Catalog. So it actually will tell you various area libraries that do stock this book already. So I'm going to go ahead and just say 75220 because that's the zip code for the library I'm working in right here. And I clicked it and it didn't seem to generate anything right away. But there's all of these options that are immediately here, and it even maps the distance. Dallas Public Library should be showing up there, so I might have to see what's going on with WorldCat because I know we stock this book. So that's how that will go about with the libraries option, and thank you for asking about that, Shivran, because that way I was able to tell everyone about a secondary resource that would serve them well.
Great. Can I ask you one more question? This is Shivran.
Oh, Shivran, okay.
Great. You mentioned that you did a similar lecture for Instagram and something else. Is the replay available of that? Because I didn't notice it.
Yes, Shivran. Both of those events are available at the Dallas Public Library's YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and you look for Dallas Public Library, there's a playlist there that's called Social Media for Seniors, and that's where both of those two presentations will be, and this one will be on there very shortly.
Great. And another just past question. You mentioned I'm a member of the Fort Worth Library because my residence is Fort Worth.
Okay.
They used to give us a small card that we could borrow like 5-10 books from the Dallas Library. Now, when it's on internet, is there a limit? Can you go to borrow a book from Dallas if you're a member of the Fort Worth? I just wanted to ask.
Well, I'm afraid I can't answer that particular question myself, Shivran. I'm sorry that I can't, but I will be happy to find out the answer to that one separately. So I have your information because of your registration here with Library Market. So I will see what I can find out about that. The reason
very fast thing. Daniel Kahneman, the author of the Thinking Faster thing, had come to the Modern Museum in Fort Worth. He gave a lecture here.
Oh, Daniel Kahneman came there?
Yeah, I just wanted you to know that.
That doesn't surprise me because when authors come out with new books, they usually do book tours. So they get extra publicity when it comes out. And I'm happy to hear that he came to Fort Worth, but I'm ashamed that I missed it because he's a pretty fascinating guy.
You'll be able to see the replay.
All right, that's good.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Billy has a question right here. Will you do a presentation on how to download books on an iPad? I think that's a valid thing to do because even though the library has a lot of different things that we do for our customers, a lot of them don't necessarily know about that. So for instance, to answer the question, I think there's probably room for that because I mentioned the 3 different e-readers that we help provide with Hoopla, with Overdrive, and Libby. And I think that would actually be a useful event. So I think I could absolutely do a demonstration of that in the future. So thank you very much for that suggestion, Billy, and we'll take that under advisement for future programming. And on the subject of future programming, I do want to go ahead and throw this out here for all of the people still in attendance. This is an example of programming changing in real time. This is not the last particular iteration of the Social Media for Seniors program. There's still a lot more that we haven't covered. But I am considering changing up the order somewhat. The next one that I had been planning on doing in this sequence, but I hadn't put it on the calendar just yet, was this one particular website called Reddit. That being the case, I've been considering, since Facebook is in the news a lot lately, I've been wondering about somewhat moving them up the card. So that might be an option that I consider doing, and we'll be, of course, sending out all of the appropriate information as we make the decisions to that. But in accordance with that particular idea, some of the other ones we're wanting to do are, I mentioned Reddit, we are going to have to do Facebook, and we're going to have to do Twitter, and we might do like the messaging ones for WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. as well as TikTok. I'm an old man in this particular regard compared to the kids these days. I don't have a TikTok, and I'm not interested in getting one aside from this particular purpose of maybe teaching other people how to use it. I think I'm just a little bit too old for that, and I've been around social media too long to be like, no, I don't want it anymore. Okay, so let's take a look back at the chat. And also, Matthew has kindly dropped the link directly to the YouTube playlist for social media for seniors. So you can right click on that one and maybe open it up in a separate tab so that you can watch it later. Anne says, thank you for the presentation. And thank you, Anne. I hope that I did a decent job for that. I've had a good amount of fun with this one, and I'm glad that we were able to help you. And oh, Shivram, Steve is also thanking you for asking good questions. And one other little bit of a program I should mention is one thing that we do every week with the Dallas Public Library is what's called the Senior Coffee Club. And it's a nice little social hour that we have every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. And it's meant to be a little bit of an escape or a balm from the pandemic. So it's just a bunch of people that includes myself. I run it most of the time. And a lot of the other people that may be showing up in programs like this one as an opportunity to just talk, have a little bit of chit chat. And I do my best to try to have it as uplifting as possible so that we all get a little bit of escape from the bad news and the pandemic blues and all of that particular stuff. So it happens again at 9 a.m. every Tuesday, and you can register for it on Dallas Public Library's Library Market. And in that particular one, if you sign up once, you never need to sign up again, because every week I'll just send out the same link for people to join in and have a good time on Zoom. Brenda Jean Myers says, thanks for the link. So great job, Matthew, on having that one ready to go. I'm going to just go back and see if there's any other questions that I missed. I see several of those comments when I was forgetting to share my screen. Shame on me. Steve had actually recommended Jasper Ford. I hadn't seen him at the same time. Someone apologized for leaving. All right, we'll have the link for the coffee club here in just a moment. All right. A presentation on ebook platforms. I can do that. That should be relatively easy. I personally use, I have used Kindle, Apple Books, as well as all of the ones that are free for the library. And there's a place for Audible too, because Audible is Amazon's audiobook program, and they're pretty good, I gotta admit. I'm listening to the Sandman audiobook right now. It's fantastic. Okay, so we're right about at 5 p.m. So I don't see any more organizing Kindle books. Now that one might, well, I can see why you're wanting that to be its own separate category. So with that being, oh, and here's the link for the Senior Coffee Club available in chat. So you can, again, right click that one, copy it, and post it into the browser so that you can register and join us on this coming Tuesday, which I think is the 12th, am I right? I am right, because a week from today would be the 13th. That's what I was trying to do. Okay, so with that being the case, I would like to go ahead and thank you all once again for joining me for this particular event. I've had a lot of fun doing it. I think we had some good questions here, and I hope I helped you decide whether or not Goodreads is going to be a good resource for you. And no pun intended on that one. With that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and bid you all a good day and a good afternoon. I hope that you all will enjoyed this, and we'll see you again for the next iteration of Social Media for Seniors, whenever that may be, once we decide which one comes next. All right, with that being the case, have a great week.
Thank you.